while everybody's been arguing about the Patriot games, see last episode, the US Navy thought, hey, we can play games too, and we are the captains now. Had to do it. They went back to the 17th century and, well, seized other vessels. What kind of vessels? Yeah, well, those just happen to be terrorist oil tankers, of course. You heard about it, seizing oil tankers. I think two seized by now. The third one, I didn't. I don't even know. I have to check again. I know they wanted to seize a third one, but the one wasn't to be seized, so they wanted to uh, jump from helicopters or something like this to seize it. I haven't followed up yet because, well, life, but wow. And we're blockading ports as well, right? And while not at war, and while I prepared for this podcast today, I just read it was on Polymarket, so hey, but still read that they're actually now also coming in by land. A war would require Congress to be like, yeah, cool, let's go to war, right? But and I actually wrote it down. If you designate a government as a foreign terrorist organization, FTO, then you don't need to go to war. If the government is a cartel, their oil is not national resource, it's funding for terrorism, and then you can seize it. So are we stealing? I mean, we are you guys, because I'm not American and I don't live in America. Are you guys stealing oil? Well, we'll have to find out. But again, as always, I would never hate on the freest country in the world. And I'm just here to look at it through a communications and media point of view. Maybe a few, like, psychological theories that fit to the whole thing, to the whole framing, to the whole narrative. Just trying to make sense of it. Okay, so let's see if we can do that. If we can see, well, how the Monroe, and yes, look at me doing my research, how the Monroe Doctrine now looks with a shotgun in its hand. Sawadee Krab and welcome to another episode here for the Funkit Pod, Mindful Media and Communication. And yeah, end of the year and the mindfulness out the window. I'm not rebranding though. So I have my quick fact sheet here just to make sure I'm getting it all right. It started on December 16, where the White House designated. I love it. I mean, for a history buff like me, that's kind of like nice to see. The White House designated a cartel of the suns. What a I actually learned about this in history class back in the day. Maduro's inner circle as an FTO, right? So this means it's an FTO. We can intervene, right? We're protecting society from drugs. Nice. I don't think I have to actually go into like the whole, well, fentanyl doesn't actually come from Venezuela part because we all know it by now. And also not going into like, maybe don't just run around saying how cool it is to bomb people and to kill people and stuff like this, because it's also a bad look, no matter if deserved or undeserved. But we look into like that whole seizure of since the Bella 1 tanker, the next tanker, the third tanker, going into it now by foot, exaggerating of course, but like via land. What are other thing about it? Because I mean, China call it like basically saying like, okay, you want to go to war, and the Treasury Department, and I have it here, claims here always material support for terror. So what do we all think about that? Why is this happening now? Yeah, what gives? And as someone who's old enough to remember the Iraq War, I can say, wow, look at this. Trump, by the way, also old enough to remember the Iraq War. Just saying, they all should know how it looks like. But okay, we all act like Iraq never happened. We're good at that. So let's see why, how, what's actually happening, and why do we think we can actually frame it in a way that makes sense. So, and China already called it like piracy, I think. Maduro called it war. Why? By the way, I am definitely not making a point that Maduro is a good guy. Don't misconstruct this podcast here. Okay, definitely not. Also, it's not international relations podcast. Obviously, it's a media and communications podcast. Okay, so that's what we're focusing on. Okay. Um, Speaking of communication, though, the U.S. Navy basically closing out like a whole corridor in the Caribbean to non-approved traffic is communication. That communicates something, and I will dive into what that communicates in just a second. Okay. As always in this pod, I'll try to bring three theories to you that relate to it. For today's pod, geopolitics and so on, the series might relate a little bit more to the political happenings, not solely communication, but they all are communication adjacent because, well, what we're doing here is, of course, communicating something as well, right? Okay, so the first theory I brought to you is one that we talk a lot about in, well, political communication class, for example. And it's called, and I have the name down because I always misspell it, Achille, ACH, because my name is SCH, Achille, Achille. Achille Mbembe, he talks about necropolitics. Okay, so necropolitics. Now, I mean, you can see the name, of course, but what does it actually mean? And in this case, you're blockading ports and blockading vessels from moving where they're supposed to move to is, of course, communication, and it's a siege, right? So, yeah, you're trying to starve a population of something that they might need. So a blockade by itself, or a siege itself, is designed to, of course, communicate. Nothing comes through, nothing goes out, and we will do this until you surrender to what we want from you, right? So it's kind of like designated, or it's designed to dictate, if we are harsh, to decide who lives and who dies. So by cutting off food, fuel, and so on, the US is kind of weaponizing the biological survival of the population, right? In this case, of the Venezuelan population. And that's when it stops to be about regime change and more about breaking the populace, right? Because you try to break them until they become governable, until they say, okay, enough is enough. We give up, we give in, just give us our food, basically. And now I know we're not exactly at that point just yet where they don't have any food, but we are at a point where blockades are happening, and blockades can be stricter, can be enforced. You know the drill. So yeah, we are definitely moving towards that. So that's necropolitics, right? So you try to make a populace suffer until they give in a nutshell. Okay, and ideally you frame it, and we talk about framing theories a lot in this podcast, right? Ideally you frame it in a way that we're only doing this because your government is funding terrorist organizations. If your government wouldn't ship drugs in and out all the time, we would not need to block the ports, for example, and hence you would be okay. So if we can get rid of your government, and if we were to be in charge, you would have anything you need. Okay, so that's communication via necropolitics. The second theory I brought to you is a theory from Mr. Schmidt from Germany, so I can actually tell you how to pronounce it. It's called der Großraum. Der Großraum basically translates to the great space. Okay, so Carl Schmidt, very most German name possible. Carl Schmidt talks about how the global free market is dead. Okay, we always say, yeah, free market, free economy, everything. The US is very much behind all of that, hates on Europe for having so many regulations and so on. But according to Schmidt, the free global market is dead. Okay, why does he say that? Well, he says it because he says we're now in an era of regional blocks. So different blocks in different regions, right? The US bloc, one, of course, right? The North Atlantic bloc, maybe one. European bloc, one. I'm in Southeast Asia now. The ASEAN bloc is one, right? You have BRICS, whatever. You have like different blocks, okay? And now the US enforcing new, more, and I say just to make a point, a new, more violent version of the Monroe Doctrine shows that they are aware of that. Yeah, they say, okay, our bloc needs to be the strongest bloc, for example. So the theory here is pretty simple, actually. The Western Hemisphere, you know, governed in their minds by the US, is a closed garden, right? It's like, hey, we decide who comes in, goes out, and we decide who's allowed in, what you need to do to come in, and so on. Yeah? From that closed garden, China's evicted anyways. Europe, right now, yeah, not big fans of Europe, right? Europe's evicted. Asia is allowed to look in sometimes if you need something. If you have resources in the Americas, they belong to the empire. That's basically how that block works right now. And yeah, so again, Großraum, great space, suggests that it's not just one global economy, for example, one global free market, because it's not, right? Because of blockades and I know fees, tolls, whatever you call it, it's not free. So that's also part of, geopolitical economic communication. You communicate who you like, who's allowed to come in, who's allowed to talk to you, who's allowed to do business with you, who you're welcoming. Yeah, we like good immigrants, we don't like the bad immigrants. Things like that. That's all also part of communication, because you communicate to the world how who's welcome, of course, and who's not, but also like how you are perceived by the world based on the way you communicate. And it's not just words you're using, it's also your actions that you're using. And in this case, blockades, going to Venezuela, for example, communicate something that lets the rest of the world, also Europeans, go like, ah, we thought you're that guy, but you really are that guy. Now, the question is, do you want to be that guy? Last theory for today, theory number 3. No more German theories. It's by David Harvey. Accumulation by dispossession. I just found this a very, 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 very fitting theory to discuss today. Do I have to explain it? Accumulation by dispossession. Very fitting theory, right? It's part of David Harvey's Marxist geography. And he says, well, capitalism has simply run out of new markets. So you cannot find more new markets, new market opportunities. Hard to come by because we explored everything. Everything is capitalist now, right? So that's why if you want to make more money, you have to cannibalize existing ones. So that's why we aren't just buying Venezuelan oil, we are taking it, we're seizing it. It's ahoy, pirate capitalism. That's what it is. So when the rate of profit falls, right, the empire stops trading and starts looting. And so the Bella one was just the start. Yeah, it was the first rate. At the second one, we tried the third one. It's not gonna stop. What's next, by the way? Russian ships? Now, Russia is too big, and we sometimes like it, and we sometimes hate them. But you pick another country, right? Pick what's next. So it's also a fallacy to think that just because we did it now to one country and they deserve it because bad, we're not going to do it anymore. We're going to stop it right here. If it works once, are you going to stop? If it works once, I mean, Iraq. So are you going to stop? Are you going to wait another 30 years and hope people are going to forget it or people are going to die off before they remember? Like, what's the plan? Exactly. So my takeaway here is that, and I don't, again, it's mostly a media and communications podcast, so I try not to make it too geopolitical. But the maps, and that's communication, the maps kind of being redrawn, right? If you have oil and you aren't our friend, you aren't a country anymore, you're a crime scene, and we have to come in and, fix you. And that's how bullies communicate. What do you think about the whole thing, by the way? Am I exaggerating? Do you think, well, they deserve it, Venezuela, Maduro deserves it, not like Maduro's a good guy, so let's just get in, take him out, take it. What are your thoughts on that? Let me know on socials at FunkedPod, leave comments on Spotify, share this thing, that would be really cool. I only mention Spotify because it's the only podcast platform with comments. Otherwise, I would prefer if you listen on Apple Music because Spotify's the devil. Love you, Spotify. Let me know what you think. Shout out comments at FunkedPod on socials. Until then, stay safe, take care, have a great slide into the new year, how we said it in Germany. And I'll catch you in 2026. Sorry, Cup.